My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I want to give my opinion about an issue called contempt of court, when judges threaten you with contempt of court. Now, before I go any further, I of course have to disclose that I am not an attorney, so any advice that I give you is not legal advice. I always smile a little bit, however, though, when I have to say this, because we have attorneys out there and they act as if they are theologians, they act as if they are philosophers, they act as if they are child psychologists, sociologists, experts in everything, and they never have to disclose that they are not psychologists or theologians or whatever, but we have to give notification to the public that we are not attorneys, so nothing that we say can be taken as legal advice. Nevertheless, I'm going to give my opinion based on a case that I was looking at recently, and again, I'm going to call this when judges threaten you with contempt of court. Now, this case was number WR-91-424-01 in the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin, Texas. Now, in this case, the Honorable Darrell Jordan, he is the County Criminal Court at Law number 16, Harris County, Texas. I always wonder, why do we have to call our judges honorable if they act in dishonorable manners? Is that considered contempt of court if we say dishonorable judge? But anyway, neither here nor there. But here is one of these honorable judges, and it looks like this honorable judge has the ability in his mind to threaten somebody with contempt of court, to give out a contempt of court as if he's passing out Halloween candy. Here's a contempt of court for you, here's one for you, here's one for you. And one of the things I think these judges should remember is the employer-employee relationship. After all, we are the taxpayers, we are their employers. They are our employees. We give them a specific job to do. They're elected to do a specific job, but they are elected to do that specific job for we, the people of Texas, we, the taxpayers of Texas. And I think sometimes these judges forget the employer-employee relationship. In fact, one of the things I'd almost think should be done at the beginning of every day when the court meets, that the judges ought to get up there and thank every person, say, I am your employee. I want to thank you, the taxpayer, for paying my salary, for paying my benefits, for paying my retirement pensions. I want to just thank you first, just to remember that I am your employee. I am going to give you the results of what I see. I am not going to boss you around. I'm not going to disrespect you. I'm not going to abuse you in my court. I'm not going to commit some type of judicial injustice against you. And if this employer-employee relationship were emphasized a little bit more, we would have a little bit less of the God complex that we sometimes see with these judges. Putting on a black robe and sitting behind a desk, they think, I am God. I am God of this court. There was even one judge who went so far as to say, in my courtroom, I am God. So I think that these judges need to remember that we, the people, are the ones who are paying their salaries. And I think that we ought to have some type of recourse to say, this judge is so stinking terrible, we no longer want to pay his salary. In fact, he's fired. He is fired. He's given him his 2-week notice, and perhaps on some issues they ought to be given an immediate dismissal, but I digress from the point of the contempt of court. So in the case that I'm going to talk about here, this is taxpayer-employer Wayne Dolcefino. He entered into the courtroom and asked his employee, his tax-supported employee, Judge God Darrell Jordan, why all of the complaints that he had filed were not being answered. And evidently, employee Darrell Jordan was a little bit upset that his employer was asking him to give an account for his behavior. Instead of answering him directly, the employee told him that he was interrupting the court and that he either had to leave the court or be held in direct contempt. Now, the interesting thing about this event, there is no indication whatsoever that there was any court hearing going on. No court hearing appeared to be taking place. If there was a court hearing taking place, it may have been an invisible one that nobody could see. Only Judge God Darrell Jordan could see this, but it was not evident to anybody else.
Here to see you, Judge.
Good to see you.
How are you?
But again, in this situation, I think that if Judge God Darrell Jordan would have remembered the employer-employee relationship, that he is an employee of the people, the taxpayers of the state of Texas, that perhaps there would have been a little bit more respect shown toward Mr. Dolcefino, as opposed to just blatant disrespect and a threat.
Less than 2 minutes later, I would be handcuffed to a chair in Judge Jordan's courtroom, charged with criminal contempt for supposedly interfering with a court hearing and heading to jail.
In this situation right here, there were no indications that the court was in session. Employee Darrell Jordan, employee Judge God Darrell Jordan, was very upset that his employer wanted to know, employee Darrell Jordan, I've been sending you all these complaints. How come you're not answering me?
You want to hold me in contempt for simply asking questions? Go ahead. I mean, we're just trying to find out why our complaints have gone unanswered.
He did not like to have to answer to his employer. So they hauled him off and they stuck him in prison.
All right, sir. Got a problem with that?
Sure.
There was a writ of habeas corpus filed by Mr. Dolcefino's attorney. Habeas corpus is a recourse in law through which a person can report an unlawful detention or imprisonment. So here he is sitting in jail, and they filed a writ of habeas corpus against Judge God employee Darrell Jordan, because Judge God employee Darrell Jordan unlawfully imposed imprisonment upon Mr. Dolcefino. Well, in this case, the actions of the judge were so egregious, so over the top, that the state of Texas conceded. The applicant is entitled to relief. How bad of a Judge God do you have to be? How disrespectful does this employee have to be to his employer, his taxpayer employer, Wayne Dolcefino, that the state of Texas says we give up? We're not even going to try to defend this, because usually the state of Texas has a duty to defend these people. And the state of Texas is like, this is indefensible. There's nothing we can do about it. No oral arguments were necessary in this case. We are just going to roll over like a dog on his back with his paws up. Whatever you want, go ahead and do it. The circumstances did not support the allegation that Judge God employee Darrell Jordan was making. So there was just no possible way that that Mr. Dolcefino was guilty of direct criminal contempt. But my purpose for this whole thing is that I wanted to learn more about what is contempt of court. What is this contempt of court stuff? Because sometimes you hear judges threaten contempt of court. I'm going to hold you in contempt. It's almost like you go knocking on somebody's door at Halloween, trick or treat, and instead of giving out candy, the judge gods give out contempt of court. Here's one for you, one for you, one for you. I'm going to threaten all of you. In fact, I've heard judges basically threaten every person in the state of Texas. If you record this proceeding, you are going to be held in direct contempt of court. Now that is an abuse of his authority, in my opinion. That is something where the employee, the judge employee, just does not want to be held accountable to his employers, the taxpayers of the state of Texas. Anyway, as you'll see right here, they started to talk a little bit about contempt of court. Direct contempt occurs when the words spoken or acts performed constituting contempt occur in the presence of the court where the judge witnesses the conduct. So it appears first off for contempt to take place that you must be in the courtroom and the judge must witness it. And I think this is very important to my point that's going to be coming up in just a few moments. Actions of direct contempt are a use of judicial power to preserve order in the courtroom for the proper conduct of business and to instantly suppress disturbance or violence or physical destruction or disrespect to the court. Now, when we look at the issues of contempt of court, if you go to some of these judicial YouTube channels, they have a big sign up there that says no direct recording, no video recording, no photographing of this YouTube video presentation, or you will be held in contempt of court. I've listened to judges that have threatened, if anybody is videotaping this, you can be held in contempt of court. Judge God Darrell threatened people with contempt of court, and that's why he cut off the YouTube hearing with Taryn Champagne in his case. And evidently, Judge God here, our employee, Mr. Darrell Jordan, thought that, you know what, I don't like him asking me why I have not been doing my duty, so I'm going to threaten him with contempt of court. Using contempt of court can be an act of judicial abuse, and I'm going to read a little bit further about that. Contempt is a strong medicine. Use it cautiously and only as a last resort. So this is not a treat for a little doggy, like doggies you pass out treats to or Halloween treats. Contempt is supposed to be a strong medicine. A strong medicine. If there's a sickness, you take a strong medicine. You don't usually take a strong medicine every day, but contempt is a strong medicine. Use it cautiously and only as a last resort. The power to punish for contempt should only be exercised with caution. And contempt is not to be presumed. But on the contrary, contempt is presumed not to exist. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now, this is a wake-up call to the judges, because the judges want to say contempt will take place if you do this, if you do that, if you do this, if you do that. Contempt is presumed not to take place. Contempt is presumed not to take place. It should be used as a strong medicine. It should be used cautiously. It is presumed not to take place, but our judge gods, our employees in the state of Texas, sometimes forget that fact. So what is contempt? The essence of contempt is that the conduct obstructs or tends to obstruct the proper administration of justice. So these judges do not like it when we videotape their hearings, because somehow that may obstruct justice or may tend to obstruct justice. In actuality, from my perspective, I think to not hold judges to the highest level of their office is to show them contempt. For us to say, you are our employee, we have given you this very special position, you must comport yourself in accordance with the judicial canons, we must be able to watch you to make sure that you are not exercising judicial abuse, we must be able to watch you to make sure that you are not abusing or threatening people that are in your court. That is a proper use of us and our responsibility to oversee our courts. Article 1, Section 13 of the Texas Constitution says the courts are to remain open. Why? The courts are to remain open so that we, the people, can go into the courts and observe the administration of justice or injustice in our courts. And if the judges don't like that, they are holding you in contempt. If the judges threaten you with contempt of court because you're watching them, because you're court watching, and I would say even if you're videotaping them, I think that is contemptuous behavior on behalf of the judges. I think that that is something that we should be allowed to do, because if we want to file a complaint against the judge, the first thing the State Commission of Judicial Conduct will ask for is the evidence. Now, that august body that very seldom actually rules against a judge, you have to show them everything on a silver platter, and you've got to have decorative things around it. And just, here you go, State Commission of Judicial Conduct, here's the evidence. And even still they'll say, I don't know, I just don't quite see it. Maybe the judge was exercising judicial discretion, because you see the state of Texas, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct also forgets that they are our employees as well. Some bad employees covering for other bad employees. That's just not a good dynamic. Once again, we, the people, the taxpayers of Texas, are the employers of these judges and also of the august body, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, to whom we send our complaints, where they basically go into the black hole and are denied for all intents and purposes. Anyway, when this was heard, there was nothing that would constitute contempt of court. There was nothing in the conversation that would indicate the court was in session, that it was in a hearing, that it was conducting any form of business whatsoever. There was nothing that would indicate that the court was in session. Yet the judge God said, you are interrupting the court. You either have to leave or I will hold you in contempt of court. Judge God, employee Darrell Jordan, was wearing his judicial attire and therefore thought he could get away with all these actions. He forgot that he was the employee, that Mr. Dolcefino and we, the taxpayers of Texas, are his employers, and he treated Mr. Dolcefino with extreme contempt and put him in jail. He had a bailiff come take him away, and that's the way the judicial abuse works in the state of Texas. Now, there was something else that took place here too. Even where a finding of direct contempt is justified, that does not automatically warrant a summary punishment of the contemptor without a notice and a hearing. So what also took place after this is that Mr. Dolcefino was deprived of due process. He was deprived of a notice and he was deprived of a hearing. And furthermore, what is stated is this: summary punishment for direct contempt is justified only when the contempt is committed in the presence of a court and there is an exigent situation, that is, one in which the judge is required to act immediately to quell disruption, violence, disrespect, or physical abuse once the immediate disturbance has dissipated and a hearing could have been held, due process. And by the way, the hearing needs to be held in public. The hearing does need to be held in public at this time anyway. There are some times that you can't have a private hearing. You can have a star chamber at times, but the court's burden is to meet a very high standard to permit that to take place. Other than that, we the people have the right to be there, and if they hold a star chamber hearing, it not only violates the individual's rights, it also violates the rights of the people of the state of Texas. They are violating many, many, many people's rights at one time by not giving us public hearings. Once the immediate disturbance has been dissipated and the hearing could have been held, due process mandates it should have been held. Respondent's refusal, and the respondent here was the employee, Judge God Darrell Jordan, his refusal to hold a hearing later in the afternoon of June 30th, despite a direct request from the applicant's counsel, was not justified. So once again, employee Judge God Darrell Jordan, he never told Mr. Dolcefino that each act of real contempt, not this made-up contempt that employee Judge God Darrell Jordan had in mind, were actually punishable by a $500 fine and up to 6 months in confinement in Harris County Jail. Even in the contempt hearing, after employee Judge God Darrell Jordan ordered that his employer, Mr. Taxpayer Wayne Dolcefino, be taken into custody, even then he did not inform his employer of the punishment range for contempt. In other words, Judge God employee Darrell Jordan was using what he thought was his judicial authority to abuse his employer. And this was what takes place many, many times a day in the courts in the state of Texas. Now, this so happened to take place in a criminal court, but I will tell you this: if you really want to see abuses take place, go to the family courts. Family courts are notoriously evil, notoriously wicked, notorious for abusing their authorities on a daily basis, sometimes almost on an hourly basis, I would believe. We cannot permit this type of judicial abuse to take place in the state of Texas. We must speak out against it. We must hold our judges accountable. We, as the employers of these Judge God employees, need to have the right to make sure that our employees, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, is finding these Judge Gods worthy of being sanctioned and punished, reprimanded, and more than just a 2-hour course and a little slap on the wrist. We need to get rid of this abusiveness. Mr. Dolcefino fortunately had the ability to hire an attorney to challenge this. And because of that, we found out that contempt of court must take place in a courtroom. The judge must witness it, not after the fact be informed of it. And it must be something that's going to cause the obstruction of justice. When we are court watching, in my opinion, and when we are videotaping or audio taping or doing whatever we do out there to watch our courts, we are not obstructing justice. We are ensuring justice. We have that right, that responsibility to observe and to oversee our courts. We should not be held in contempt of court. And these judges that threaten us with contempt of court, they have contempt of the public. And we need to start holding them to account. Every time they hold us and try to hold us into contempt of court, every time they try to use the contempt of court as the Halloween candy trick or treat they hand out to people, we need to be filing complaints against them. They are abusing their authority. They are not treating us in a dignified and respectful manner. We need to clean up our courts in the state of Texas. The criminal court here was one, but we really need to clean up the family courts or the anti-family courts, where the judges often think that they themselves are the Constitution and that they themselves are the law and that they themselves are the God over people's lives. Anyway, that's it. I want to thank Mr. Dolcefino, a friend of mine, for going through this, for challenging it, and for allowing us to have access to this document, this wonderful document, which tells us what contempt of court is and also puts restraints upon judges in exercising their ability to want to throw out their contempt of court. Once again, this is all in my opinion. I am not an attorney, and once again, I wish the attorneys would just let people know that they are not theologians, they are not counselors, they are not mediators. There's a lot of things that they aren't, that they pretend to be. If they hold us to one standard, we need to hold them to the same standard as well. And that's it for right now. Thank you so much.
So I'm in custody for contempt of court, and I don't need my mask because I am stuck in this room waiting to be taken to jail. Take a look.
Well-known investigative reporter Wayne Dolcefino walked into court shackled and disheveled.
After a night in jail with my bologna sandwich, I was taken off the chain gang just long enough to be brought back into court. My head bowed, trying to keep the COVID mask on as required by the judge. I am now in an elite group. There have been 45 folks charged with contempt of court in the 38 criminal courts in Harris County in 3.5 years. And no one, no judge has used this awesome power more than Judge Jordan, who loves to talk about fairness.
There can only be one standard, and that's how we end discrimination. That's how we end unequal treatment in our courts. We ensure that everyone is treated the same.
Yet I'm the only single person in the entire county who wasn't already charged with another crime who was arrested and convicted for contempt in 2 hours. But if you believe Judge Jordan, well, my questions that morning, they were off the charts.
And what happened yesterday was completely off the charts. The only thing I could have done different was get down on my knees and beg your client to please stop.
What Judge Jordan didn't know until now was that the entire conversation we had in court that morning was captured on hidden camera. And that means it's now public. The best evidence of what really happened that morning. Part of my formal appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.